Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to be creating this fun card using some brand new images from the Lawn Fawn collection. This one is called Would You Be Mine? We're also going to be creating that beautiful sky background using some Distress Oxide sprays and also some beautiful Ranger texture paste in metallic white. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got some dies here from Lawn Fawn. These are the large mini slimline stackable dies. We are going to be making a mini slimline card today. And for cardstock, I'm using the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut this. I'm running it through my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. And I've got the little craft mat that came with my Tim Holtz glass mixed media mat. So I'm just placing that here in the center so that you can see what I'm doing. Now I've got 3 Distress Oxide sprays, and I've got Shaded Lilac, Picked Raspberry, and Villainous Potion. And so we're going to be spraying these right onto this cardstock. And you do want to make sure you shake the bottles really well. Make sure you mix that up. And then I'm just going to start spraying right onto the cardstock and just kind of randomly, just getting a nice coating of ink. I'll come back to those colors again. Here's the Villainous Potion, which is a little bit dark. So I'm not going to add any more of that. I'm going to go back to the Shaded Lilac and the Picked Raspberry just to add a little bit more color. Now to blend this out, I'm using my Distress Sprayer, which just has water in it. And I'm going to add a lot of this to this cardstock. I want to really blend these colors together. I want to get a beautiful blended sky. Now you don't have to use as much water as I'm using here if you don't want to. You don't have to use any water if you don't want to, but I wanted that kind of marbleized look. You can see where you're getting kind of those veins running through that cardstock. So now I'm going to heat set this with my heat tool, but I'm also going to blot up any of that excess along the edges. I just don't want it to puddle up along those edges and create a really dark edge. So I'll just blot up all that. You could use that ink for something else if you prefer. You could leave it there and get another piece of cardstock and lay that cardstock right into that extra ink so that you don't waste it. But in this case, I just blotted it up and I'll go ahead and heat set this. So you can see that beautiful effect we're getting, that beautiful kind of marbly effect. So now that I have that heat set, I'm just straightening out that paper just a little bit. I'm going to place this on my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Station. So I've just placed it down there, and then I've got the Starry Sky stencil from Lawn Fawn, and I'm going to use those magnets to hold this stencil in place. We're going to be adding some paste. And for paste, we're going to be using the Ranger texture paste. I'm using a palette knife from Tim Holtz to spread that paste around. And again, this is the texture paste in the metallic white. And look at this. This is just gorgeous. It's so creamy and just buttery looking. And it goes on so smooth. And what I do want to mention here is that it doesn't pull up any of the color from underneath, so it will stay that bright white metallic, which I really like, because sometimes when you spread on your texture paste, some of the color underneath gets absorbed or pulled up into that paste. And with this particular product, I did not find that happening, so I really love that. So make sure you clean off your palette knife really well. And then let's reveal those beautiful metallic stars. And these are just gorgeous. I'll just scrape away any excess here along the edges. And then I can set this aside to dry. Now you do want to make sure that you take your palette knife and your stencil to the sink and rinse that off pretty quickly. You don't want that to dry on there. So I've got my stitched mountain borders from Lawn Fawn. And there's 2 different sizes, a large mountain border and the smaller one. I'm going to be using that smaller one today. And I've got some Lawn Fawn cardstock here from the Neutrals paper pack collection in this kind of medium gray. And I'm going to also die cut those little snow cap tops for my mountains out of some white Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So let's go ahead and die cut that first set of mountain border here. I'm going to tape that down with a little bit of purple tape, and then I'll go ahead and run that through the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and then we'll be die cutting a second set of those little mountains, and that'll be just a little bit shorter than that first set. So I've got some Distress Oxide in the black soot, and I've got a small blending brush, and I'm going to go ahead and blend a little bit of a shadow onto the tops of these mountains, and then kind of down in between, sort of in between there. So I want to give it a little bit of a shadow. And you can see that mountain border has that beautiful stitch border, so everything's going to coordinate really nicely with all that stitching. We're going to be adding a little stitch pond here in a second, and I'll show you that. So everything, again, will kind of coordinate really well. So I've got my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, I've got my Marvy jewel picker, and I'm just going to position these little snow caps right on the tops of these mountain peaks. So I went ahead and did that for all of those. And then to give these a little bit of sparkle, I'm using my Wink of Stella clear glitter pen and just adding that to the tops. And again, that's going to give it a pretty sparkle. So you can see how that's going to sit on our card panel. I did decide that since that paper that we had used to spray got a little bit warped, so I die cut a second panel the exact same size, and I'm going to glue these two together. That'll just flatten this out and give it a little bit more substance. So we can set that aside to dry. Now here's that stitched pond that I mentioned earlier. So, and that comes with some cute little accessories as well. So I've cut a piece of this cardstock. This is from the Rainbow paper pack, and I believe this color is called Blue Jay. And I'm just going to die cut a little section of this pond. Again, I'm taping that down with some purple tape, and I'll run that through the die cutting machine. Now I just want to add a little shadow to this as well, so I'm using that black soot and that smaller blending brush and just going to add a little shadow around the edges. And that little piece is cut to 3 inches wide, just like the other pieces were. Our finished card will be 3 inches by 6 inches. So now I've got this adorable little stamp set from Lawn Fawn. This is a brand new stamp set, and this is called Would You Be Mine? And I also have the coordinating dies there. So I've grabbed some of the images. I've got that little wood log, and I've got the 2 little beavers holding that heart. And then I've got some of the little greenery that we're going to be placing around the card. I'll be stamping some extras of that greenery. I've got my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp these. Now let's start off with the light violet to color in the heart. And I'm using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens to do my coloring. And again, as I always say, these are a water-based marker, so you could certainly use a water brush here to do your blending as well. I'm using the Zig Blender pen to do my blending, and I'm adding the color around the edges and then just pulling in towards the center. And I should also mention that all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. And this particular set has so many cute little sentiments. Would you be mine? We're going to be using the little Happy Valentine's Day, which will fit right inside that little heart that the little beavers are holding. There's an I love you and a you and me that also fit in there. And then there's a little tree trunk. There's a little bow tie. There's a little cluster of hearts, a little card like a little Valentine card, And then some other cute sentiments. I choose you, miss you a log, would you be mine, which we're going to also be using today, and happy day. So this set has all the coordinating pieces that you need. And there's also a little add-on set that is also available that has two little beavers that are hugging each other, which is really just adorable. So I'm going to finish coloring in this little beaver here. And we'll darken up the tail just a little bit. I thought we would add a little more shadow down here at the bottom of the tail and then just pull that up towards the top. And I'll color in that little beaver on the left the exact same way. So now let's go ahead and color in this log. And I grab the gray brown and I'm going to add that color kind of towards the bottom and along the two sides, and then I'll pull that up. I wanted to pick a different color brown, and I thought the gray would be kind of a nice complement to those little gray mountains that we have, that we're going to be having in the background. And then I'm adding a little bit of dark brown kind of in the green of that wood and just kind of pulling that up. So just to add a little bit of that grainy effect there. So this is really quick and simple to do this little log, and I thought it came out really cute. Now for the greenery and for these little cattails, I'm using beige and mid brown. I'll just add the beige and then a little mid brown off to the left hand side and pull it over towards the right. Then I've got olive green and mid green for these little leaves and the grass. And to brighten these up a little bit, I'm coming in with that smoky yellow. And then I did decide to add a little bit of mid brown to these little branches. So I added a little bit of that. Now I've got the coordinating dies. I'll go ahead and tape those down with a little bit of Post-it tape, and then we can run those through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. And I did that for all of those little pieces. Let's grab that Wink of Stella glitter pen again, and we're going to add some glitter to that entire little heart. We will be stamping over this, but this is okay. We're going to let this dry completely before we do our stamping. So I let that dry, and now I've got the Happy Valentine's Day. And again, that little sentiment fits right inside this little heart. And we'll go ahead and ink that up with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and we can stamp that. Now going back to that little pond, this set includes some little waves. There's 3 different sizes of waves. I'm going to grab all 3 of those, and I'll be stamping those with some Versamark watermark ink. That's a clear ink, and then we'll be embossing that. So first let me put down a little bit of the anti-static powder, and then again we're using the Versamark watermark ink pad. We'll go ahead and ink those up. And I stamped these a couple of times. In the end, not too many of these actually showed, but I did go ahead and do that. And then I've got my Ranger super fine detail white embossing powder. We'll sprinkle that on over the top, tap away any excess, and then I can go ahead and heat set that with my heat tool. So we can set that aside for now. And here's where I'm going to grab that sentiment. It says, "Would you be mine?" I've got just a strip of white cardstock and my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to stamp that. And then we'll be using the Lawn Fawn Everyday Sentiment banners to cut this down. I'm going to slide that die over towards the left a little bit because we'll be cutting away some of that excess. So again, I'll run that through the Sizzix Sidekick machine. Now, for the card base, I've got a piece of cardstock that measures 3 inches by 12 inches. I'm scoring it at the 6-inch mark, and I'm folding that and pressing that out with the bone folder. So this will be a mini slimline card. This is the exact same size as the card panel that we created. So I'm going to apply some Nouveau Deluxe adhesive all around the front of the card, and then I'll glue these two together. Now we can go ahead and start adding some of our elements. We've got the taller mountainous border. I'm going to start with that. Just make sure you line it up right with the bottom edge of your card, and then we'll come in with this smaller mountainous border. Now you could certainly use some 3D foam tape here if you prefer that. I just thought I would keep it a little bit on the flatter side. We will be popping up the little log and the little beaver sitting on the log. So I thought I'd keep the rest of the items fairly flat. So let's start adding some little cattails. And I stamped and colored in quite a few of these little extra pieces, just to make sure I would have enough to kind of complete this little scene. I've got some of the little grass. Now for this log, I'm going to tuck it down a little bit. You will see here in a minute, I do end up moving this. I felt like it was up a little too high once I went to put my little critters on there. So I've got some 3D craft foam tape. I'll remove the backing and then I'll pop this in place, but again, I will be moving that. You can see here, once I position those little critters, and I will put a little bit of foam tape on the top of those critters up towards their top of their heads, and then we'll glue the bottom part to this log. So here's where I decided it was a little too high, so I carefully pulled that off and positioned it down just a little bit lower. And now I can go ahead and add this. So I'll add a little glue towards the bottom, and then I've got that foam tape up towards the top of those critters. And so that'll sit nice and flat there. Let's add the rest of our little pieces. I've got these little branches. I just stamped and colored about 3 of these just to have a little filler back there. I wanted to bring in a little bit of that green. So I'm just tucking those in behind here. And a couple more clusters of that grass. And this one here, I pulled it out in front of that log, and I'm just tacking that down right on the front of that little log. Now we've got our sentiment, so let's cut that down to size, and we can pop this up. Again, I'm going back to that 3D foam tape. And we'll position this off to the left side of the card. And now let's add some pretty sparkle. Look at these beautiful opalescent sequins. These are from Spellbinders, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. I love how they don't have the hole in the center. I just think that makes these so much more elegant. So I'm going to grab 3 of these and just pop these up towards the sentiment, just again for a little bit of sparkle and interest up towards the top of the card. I'm using my Marvy Jewel Picker and the Nouveau Deluxe adhesive to attach these. And now I've got some Nouveau Crystal Glaze. This is just a clear glaze. I'm going to put some on the noses of these little critters. And I'm just testing it on my scrap paper to make sure there's no bubbles. And then I'll add, again, that little glossy finish to their noses. Now I'm back to the Wink of Stella glitter pen and adding a little bit more. Now I've got the ink pad, the Distress Oxide ink pad in the Villainous Potion, which coordinates with the sprays that we used earlier. and I've got that little tiny blending brush. I've slid a piece of scrap paper in my card just to add this little darkened edge around the sky. I just thought it needed to be framed a little bit better. So I'm just, again, using this tiny little brush. You could certainly use a sponge dauber here. Something that will get into just a little bit on those edges. Now you will notice that when I did that, it does put a little bit of ink over top of our metallic stars. So I'm just using a paper towel and I'll just brush away any of that excess ink sitting up on top of those stars. So let's take a closer look at the finished card. And again, we've got a 3" by 6" finished card. And I just love that beautiful sky. It's just so pretty with those beautiful white metallic stars. We've got a little bit of sparkle on the mountaintops and then our cute little critters. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thanks so much for joining me today. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.